Yes, I'll start again then. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at North Norfolk District Council on Wednesday, the 15th of February 23. And our first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence.
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Saul Penfold, Councillor Nigel Housden, Councillor Emma Spagnola, and Councillor Peter Fisher.
Thank you. And substitutes?
Yes, we have Councillors John Toy and Councillor Nigel Pearce.
Okay, thank you both for that. Item 3, questions, public questions and statements.
None received.
Thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of our last meeting. So that's the meeting held on the 25th of January. If we can just go through them, please, for accuracy. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Is everybody comfortable that they are a fair and true representation of that meeting and I can sign them as such? Okay, I see no absentees on that. Thank you very much. I will duly sign. Item 5, items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any.
None received.
Thank you. Item 6 is declarations of interest in relation to today's business. Does anybody have any declarations of interest using the guide that's in our notes today with respect to today's business? No? Okay, thank you. Item 7, petitions from members of the public.
Again, none received.
Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee by a member.
None received.
Thank you. Item 9, responses of the council or the cabinet to the committee's reports or recommendations.
So there's just two to note there from the pre-scrutiny of the draft budget and the MTFS. I think there are two recommendations there. One is about including modelling for potential inflation of staff costs for up to 5%, which I believe has now been included in the report, and also to begin contingency planning in advance, further in advance of the 24-25 budget, which was also accepted at cabinet. So both accepted.
Okay, thank you. Any observations on those? No, thank you. Item 10 then is the waste contract. That's the Serco briefing on the target operating model update and the progress with regard to the miscollections problems that we've had in recent months. So, Officer Hems, would you wish to introduce this matter?
Thank you and good morning, members. I think the best thing for me to probably do is just to hand over directly to George Roach, who's the senior contract manager for the tri-borough contract with Serco, who's provided some figures and information that you have had circulated. My apologies, it arrived late with you, but George will probably explain that they've got some pressures on their time at the moment, which meant that that he had to focus on some other activity.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Roach, and over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I've obviously been, this is my third time in front of you to talk around the waste contract. And as Steve said, apologies for the delay in getting the figures across to you. We were focusing on some of the issues we've been having, and it caused a delay in getting them across. What we have seen in the figures is we are still seeing a reduction in the number of misbins. We were seeing a steady progression through our misbins up until just before the Christmas catch-up weeks. So the Christmas catch-up weeks, we did see a spike in misbins that came through. Part of that reason is struggling to get the workforce to work on a Saturday catch-up. It's part of our current union negotiations is making those contractual working day. Currently within North Norfolk, they're not. So we did struggle to get some people working, which led to a spike in miscollections. However, after the 3 catch-up weeks, we then have seen those miscollections drop back down again. We're not quite at the level where we'd want to be. Over the last 2 weeks, we've averaged around about 120 total missed reports. Where we were pre-go live is we were just below 100. So we're close to where we were before we went to go live, but we're not quite exactly where we want to be at present. We are still running support vehicles on a regular basis for the crews. So we currently have 2 support vehicles running to support the operation to ensure that we can complete. And those support vehicles will stay until we're sure that actually the service is as stable as it can possibly be at this moment in time. Some of the initiatives that we've put in over the last few months, and these have been in conjunction with the operations team from your side, and also in talks with Councillor Adams. So thank you for the information that he sends through to us as well. We are now doing crew weekly debriefs with all of the worst performing crews with regards miss bins. That will potentially lead to further sanctions on the crews if they don't start improving their performance. So basically performance improvement plans where we have issues with them. The supervisors are also now going out to any assisted misbins or repeat misbins that we have to specifically meet the crews on site. So we do have a full supervisory team in place now, and they are traveling around meeting the crews, making sure they actually understand where the bins are, if there's any bins down alleyways or sort of around the backs of properties where we have missed them in the past. So we are taking those initiatives to bring down any of the missed properties as far as we possibly can. Happy to take any questions.
I think if we probably deal with it in maybe piece parts, if we're talking about performance, there's the matter of where we are with regard to the target operating model and the gap analysis that we've spoken of before. Do you want to deal with that next? We'll deal with questions here, or how do you want to play that, Dr. Hems?
I think if we take any questions you might have about performance in terms of missed bins, etc., and then we'll pick up
okay,
the gap
questions
analysis
on performance then. Councillor Toy.
Thank you for the update. Yeah, I appreciate you've got things in place to find missed bins. Do we have many that are consistently missed? So what one customer is continually missing, and are they identified? Thank you.
We did have a few where we had continual misbins, and that's part of the process that we put in place now. So those crews where we have anybody who's missed, so the first time they missed, obviously they get sent back to that. If they get missed a second or third time, that's when the supervisor is now going out to those. We didn't have a very robust process up until recently to make sure that we capture those so that we don't have the same residents. What we've seen with the reporting coming through is where we've had properties where we've had continual misses, we've made sure the supervisors are now going out to those properties, and if need be, speaking to the residents as well, to one, apologise, and two, make sure that we've got their bin moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Holiday.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming along. How recent is recent? Because I've had quite a lot of missed bins until about 2 weeks ago.
So we've been working on the processes and refining the processes throughout the whole time, but we put in a much more robust process since probably just after the Christmas catch up. So we are still seeing misbins coming through. We should not be seeing very many of the repeats coming through. So those have dropped off quite significantly where we have repeat misbins for residents.
Right, because these were repeat misbins until a couple of weeks ago. So I would slightly disagree with that, but they may be geographical.
Okay.
And the NNDC has details. And the only other thing is, in your total misbins on contract, at your best you missed 77, and the last number is 186. So that's quite a difference.
Sorry, I missed part of that question on the total missed bins.
The total missed bins, right at the bottom,
Mhm.
almost right at the bottom. Your best performance ever, this was right at the beginning, was 77 missed bins, and the most recent number is 186. So that's quite a difference still. Unless I'm reading the graph incorrectly.
The most recent number is 132.
Okay, that's not on the information that we were given. But if it's 132, then that's better than 186, but it's still worse
Yes.
than 77. Thank you.
I think it, if I may, Chair, I think it is worth noting that we will always get some degree of missed bins because there will, a bin is defined as a collection that's not completed on the scheduled day of collection. So there will be occasions where crews can't access a road for parked vehicles or for, for roadworks or whatever reason it might be. There is a degree to which it's not possible for the crews to get a large freighter down a road to do a collection. Crews then go back the following day to attempt that collection. In fact, they continue to do that until they can actually facilitate it. But actually, in terms of those, they are still included in the missed and missed bin figures. My bigger concern is about the number of bins that are rectified within the rectification period. Serco, I think, had some issues of not going back within the rectification period. That is effectively the following working day now. So if Serco are notified of a missed bin, they have to go within the next working day in order to collect it. That level of response now has improved very significantly, and in fact, I think is now within the parameters that we wouldn't want to see anyone not returned for the next working day, but is now coming back down to the parameters that we'd expect to see in terms of that performance management failure rate. So there is, for clarity for members, there is still absolutely work to be done here. This is not yet at a level that I am comfortable with. I think the position that Serco have adopted around repeated missed is long overdue, but equally has been complicated by some of the Christmas catch-up. It always leads us to an increased number of bins residents. It's very easy if it's out of schedule from your normal activity and what you're normally expecting. In fact, my wife reminded me the other day that I needed to put the bin out because I'd forgotten on the correct day. So it is easy, and sometimes those are reported as missed. People will ring up and say my bin hasn't been collected, and also people will ring back up on the day that they expect. So if they're collected on a Monday, they will ring and report a bin as being missed, and we are taking those out. But there are reasons why bins aren't collected on the scheduled day. The point is that we need to minimize that number to the absolute. It shouldn't be down to crew error, if you like, crews not collecting the bins on the days, when they're presented in a normal fashion.
Are you comfortable with that response?
I mean, it's not as good as it was. So whatever error there is worse than it used to be. So that's a change there.
Absolutely, and this is not a finished position. This is continuing to work on and push Serco hard in order to ensure that they are providing the highest standard of collections.
We're still on a journey. Councillor Cushing and then Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it is a concern after 5 months, we actually are still on the journey. So I guess my question I made to Officer Hems is, do you have a destination date when this will all be back to where it was prior to the change of the timetable?
Yes, I do, which is effectively now. That's what I'm pushing Serco to deliver. From my perspective, there is no reason for them not to be able to get to a point where they are at an acceptable level of mists, within the next week or so. They've put steps in place that absolutely should be achievable at this point in time. And I accept there are all sorts of factors that cause bumps in the road, maybe a puncture, a vehicle breakdown. But there is no reason why Serco, with the support provision that they've got, should not be in a position where they are implementing the collections in a way that doesn't cause miscollections.
Looks as though we could be at the end of this month or early next month. And is that the timescale that you're looking at to reach the destination, so to speak?
My desire was to reach the destination 12 weeks after the implementation of the TOM, which was the timescale that was agreed with Serco. We are, as officers, pushing extremely hard for Serco to achieve an acceptable level of collections now, and I will continue to do so. Clearly, what I can't do is actually bring that about unless Serco are able to do the delivery with the workforce, in terms of getting those collections done to a consistently high standard. But yeah, that's my intent, is that we are pushing very hard in order to get those collections right first time at this juncture.
Okay, thank you. You content with that?
Yes, I suppose, Steve, it's what's going to be different in the next few weeks. What's not happened in the last 12. I mean, that's the concern. What additional actions can be taken in order to get it back to where it needs to be, and haven't really heard. Not sure I've been quite convinced on that matter.
I mean, Serco are at their own cost deploying a significant, or a degree of, it is probably from Serco's point of view, it is a significant amount of additional resource into the contract to ensure those collections are done with support crews and support rounds. That is a position that they have committed to continue to do until they can stabilise the position. In terms of the action they're now taking with crews, in terms of saying you are now going to do this, or there is a consequence around performance, then those steps are much more robust. And I would anticipate that through those performance improvement plans with crews and individuals, that will bring around an improvement in performance.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rest.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you mind if I read a couple of very quick messages that have been sent to me in the week relating to this? This is from the 8th of February, so a week ago. This is one of my constituents. Just want to bring you up to date on missed bins. Mine has been missed 8 times. They have missed 48-hour windows after reporting, etc. I've complained to Serco, Councillor Cromer, and I believe Waste Services at Cromer also. Nothing is being done. Not asking for you to get involved at this point, but don't know if you would. But it continues to ask your help or advice in the near future. I pay for this service. I asked him to just clarify, was it his road or whatever. It's just numbers 1 and 3 Kendoy Court. I've reported it since the first time in September. They changed something, and since then it's been a mess. Wenston Way bins are Monday, Norwich Road and Kendoy are Tuesday. These do run parallel. They even emptied Norwich Road Tuesday this week and left mine. When Serco received a missed bin report, they offered to pick up within 48 hours. They missed this 48 hours window twice as well. He has spoken to Joseph Kenny and to Scott, so they are aware of this, but I just thought it was relevant to mention it now. I'm sure other members are getting very similar sort of reports. It's not unique to Fakenham, which I consider to be a pretty good service. So that's something. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think probably some of us have, we would would recognise.
I think you would.
Some of those email and telephone conversations. So I don't want to comment on those.
So for any of those that have come through to me and where the local team are dealing with it from Matt's point of view. So we have had ones that go through to Joseph and come through to our call centre as well. With regards to some of the roads being done on slightly different days, that was part of the reroute. So it is something that the depot and the management team are looking at optimizing if need be. And that wouldn't have it necessarily a specific end destination. That's a continuous thing that will happen throughout the life of the contract, really, where we move small amounts as they need to be. Where we've only been missing one or two in a road, that's where we're having the supervisors go out to find out why we're only missing those one or two. I know there's a couple of roads where, for instance, the last two properties are actually quite far down the end of the road and the truck's not going all the way down because they don't realize that they're there. Part of the processes we put in place now is for the supervisors to actually go out and meet the truck, take them all the way down, make sure that the bins are done.
And what officers are doing as well is where they have them is they print out the map showing where the property is, and then they send that through to Serco's Serco supervisors and say, this is where it is. So those maps are also being shared with the crews so that you can identify some of those properties. I accept this one's probably not in an obscure location, but in some of the rural locations, there is a degree to which it's not necessarily clear where the property is, or even where the curtilage of the property is, and so there has been a tendency to miss some of those. But I'm happy for anyone who has those repeat misses, please send them through to the cleansing team, and if you want, or copy them into me. It's better to send them direct to cleansing and copy me in rather than direct to me, because obviously the cleansing team deal with them day in and day out, but we will then raise them and flag through to Serco those ones in particular.
Okay, happy with that? Okay, Councillor Patikova.
Thank you. Good morning. I suppose mine's a sort of potentially a three-part question, but if I start with the first part and see where we go from there. How does the performance in North Norfolk compare with the other two members of the contract, please?
So with regards to Kings Lynn, I'll speak of them first. So Kings Lynn have a much lower number of misbins. The change that Kings Lynn saw within their target operating model, it wasn't as big of a change as what we did in North Norfolk. So for Kings Lynn, they had, from memory, it was around about a 15 to 20% day change when they went to their target operating model. Kings Lynn workforce is also I'd like to say almost more stable than North Norfolk. They're a different union in Kings Lynn, so we haven't had any of the union pay negotiations. A pay deal was settled in Kings Lynn quite early on, whereas we're still in negotiations currently at North Norfolk and Breckland. Breckland misbins are slightly lower than what they are in North Norfolk, but quite a bit higher than what they are in Kings Lynn. So North Norfolk still does have the highest misbins currently from where we are. Breckland sits in the middle, and then Kings Lynn a lot better.
Sorry,
Steve. Just to add, for understanding or for context, Breckland went first with their Tom, so they've 6 months ahead of North Norfolk, and Kings Lynn is about 4 months ahead. So they've had a longer period to settle down. I think it's fair to say in the initial stages of Breckland, they probably had a far higher rate of misbins than North Norfolk experienced across that first period. It has now settled down into a probably a much better position, and I speak quite regularly with the officers from Breckland, and they are, relatively satisfied with the level of performance that they have currently.
So I suppose, and I appreciate these things take time to settle down, and we are on different stages of each journey at each authority. But I suppose my next question would be then, so if those have settled down, are there any measures that you have learnt from those two that you could have brought across that you haven't? And if not, why not?
So the target operating models were very different in the other two authorities. As I said, Kings Lynn was a small percentage change. Breckland was slightly higher, but nowhere near the percentage change of day changes that we did in North Norfolk. So the actual target operating model change was around about 90% of residents received a either different day or different week collection service. So it was a very significant change, one for residents and two for drivers. Some of the processes that we've put in place have been brought across from Breckland, and we have actually been talking to the Kings Lynn contract manager as well, where he can support Matt, who's our contract manager in North Norfolk, with any of the processes that he's got in place at Kings Lynn. Some of those are around what I've already mentioned with the supervisors going out. The other element, as I touched on, is the workforce relations at North Norfolk and Breckland are very different to what they are at Kings Lynn. And that's something that we're working on with the unions and with our dealings with the unions to improve the workforce relations as far as that.
I suppose that was part 3 of my question. I seem to recall the last time we met, I asked you a question about the terms and conditions that the North Norfolk workforce were on compared to the others, and you assured me they were all very similar and in line. Is that the case still?
So they were all offered the same pay deal at the same time. So Kings Lynn, Breckland, and North Norfolk. As I mentioned, Kings Lynn settled in November of last year with that pay deal offer, whereas Unison at North Norfolk and Breckland rejected the pay deal, and we're still currently in negotiations with them to settle the pay as far as it goes. We had an improved offer that was put out to them last week, and we're waiting on the ballot results for that offer. Once that offer comes through, it will be the same across all councils. So whatever offer is agreed moving forward is across all 3. So the difference in terms and conditions, for instance, at Kings Lynn, they contracted to work at catch-up Saturdays and always have been, whereas North Norfolk and Breckland haven't. Part of our negotiation was to put that into North Norfolk and Breckland so that they have the same terms and conditions. There are some nuances in there in a full answer of terms and conditions, because we have lots of 2P transfers. So we've got some people who've been on contract for the last 30 years who were originally council workers, and some who joined 2 months ago. They will have different terms and conditions because the 2P process obviously protects some of those. But with regards to pay, sickness, and holiday, there is now a base benchmark that goes across all 3 contracts.
Okay, so it wasn't originally all the same when I asked the first time.
They were all the same at that point when you asked the first time. Kings Lynn have accepted the pay deal that was offered to all 3.
Okay. Thank you.
Similarities with differences. Right. Okay. Councillor Bathwaite.
Yeah, I just ask if you're confident that the next hole in the road is the summer holidays, and obviously all our second homes are going to start being occupied. And are you confident that this extra workload won't be to the detriment of local residents? Thank you.
So some of the second homes fall under trade collections.
Second homes, not holiday homes.
So not the holiday lets. So this would be people coming up.
But there will be much more people using their bins because they'll start coming up and using their second homes.
So our experience in the past, summer seasons, is that there are 2 issues that arise during the summer. One is that bins that haven't been presented suddenly start to get presented, but it's not a massive uplift in quantity. It's catered for in terms of the round capacity, because Serco in designing the rounds design them with assuming that all the properties on a road will need a collection. So in terms of pass rates, etc., it should be catered for. The second issue that it presents is access in certain areas. So some of the access locations which are I wouldn't say easy to do, where there is access, but it's slightly challenging. Suddenly have cars parked in front of them, you know, in addition. And so there are occasions where we struggle with access issues through the summer, and we negotiate with Serco. Sometimes they'll do those via a smaller vehicle, or they'll put in special arrangements to be able to do those. So, you know, it's not as if this is the first summer that we've had, you know, that we experience this. It happens every year. It always causes a degree of challenge. Often that challenge is different year to year, but I'm confident that will be catered for in the collection rounds. What we're looking at now is issues of mists, either sporadic mists or, you know, that are often repeated, or we're at areas where they've not been able to collect because of other factors such as breakdowns or other issues. So I'm confident that we will not have a massive issue, but there is always some degree of disturbance, if you like, in the collection regimes when we get a significant influx of visitors to the district.
We'll wait and see.
Yeah, just come back if I may, Chair. Yeah, because really these figures now is never going to be so simple as for collecting bins as now, these 2 months. But beyond February and March, we move into the season when it will become very difficult, much more difficult to provide the service that you should be providing during February and March.
Yeah, absolutely, you're correct. We don't see it ramps up during the months post, you know, sort of towards Easter and post Easter into the sort of July and August time, you know, becomes the absolute peak. But absolutely, you know, our expectation is that that's a requirement of the contract, and therefore that Serco will need to put on adequate resource in order to be able to cope with that.
We may revisit that point in the future, but let's hope not. Councillor Adams.
Thank you. So as you know, I go through the list, the full list of missed bins every week, and I have done now for quite a number of weeks. I suppose I've been more pleased, I should say, to see the numbers around 100 tree misses over the last 2 weeks. That's taking out all of the other reports that we can't quite consider to be a miss, where there are, you know, maybe they've reported twice in error, or indeed the bin has been collected shortly after they've made their report on the same day, so it's not actually a miss. It's, you know, perhaps they're getting a bit anxious about when that bin is going to be collected, and other small factors like that. So it's been around 100. That's still not good enough. You know, we need to be, I'd say, around 70 to have been missed bins of all types to be back where we were, I guess. And, you know, I'd urge you to try and meet that sort of target really that I've been setting within my emails, and a bit more responsiveness to those emails if that's okay as well. Obviously, you know, I do have particular concerns about the repeated misses. I think it's fair to say most of the issues have been in the sort of centre of the district. I hear what Councillor Rest was saying about Kendoy Court, is it? You know, I spotted that on the list this week for last week, but not the week before. So we're seeing sort of these sporadic issues in the urban areas, which I think are sometimes down to just human error, whereas we're seeing repeated misses in some of the rural villages that I really think we should be sort of getting on top of by now entirely. That list of repeated misses is certainly reduced, but the addresses I've pointed out in Hanworth, Sco-Rust and Beeston St Lawrence, you know, that I'm so familiar with now, I could probably remember their postcodes and everything. I could just, you know, say it to you now. So that's clearly not where we should be. That said, the numbers of those are clearly reducing to a smaller number. So I think if you can focus on those in the next few weeks, and can you give us any steer on when you will reach that sort of number, about 70 misses of all types? I suppose that's my question to you today. I think clearly we've had a difficult few months with this, and I consider it likely we'll have to take performance related deductions because of the impacts on residents. But what we really want to see above everything else is obviously a good service. Thank you.
So I agree with what Officer Ham said earlier, is we would like to be at that performance level now. I've set targets for the management team at Norfolk. So Matt and his team to be bringing us down to actually below the 70. The target I've set for them is to get to 60. If we're at 60 or 70 misbins, that puts us in the region of about 50 to 60 per 100,000, which is considered to be a good performance across most authorities. So that's sort of normally where the concession limit sits, is what we're aiming for. Ideally, we'd like to be closer to 0 is where we'd like to be, but we fully understand that there are some other elements sometimes, and some of it is human error on both sides that comes through. The repeated miss, I've said we are going through those lists specifically, and I'd like to apologize if you haven't received a response quickly enough, Councillor Adams. It's something that I've raised internally to make sure that when those come through, we give you a response as quickly as possible. What Peter's been doing in the background is working on a different system of reporting that gives us all of those fairly quickly as well. So pulling them out of white space so that the supervisors aren't having to try and remember some of the roads, although as you mentioned, some of those are very memorable. And we are seeing a reduction in those coming through, and that's partly down to the supervisors going out. From my side, I'd like to be at that number, ideally by the end of the month, is where we'd like to be, which is what Steve's mentioned as well, is that being down at the limit of 70. And that's across total misses, including trade that we've included in there as well.
Okay,
thank you. No, that was all from me. See, we are not too far off that 70 number, but just urge every action taken to get there this week, if possible.
I think that would be agreed. The journey destination as soon as possible, I think, is the objective there. Councillor Pearce.
Morning, quick question. Why are, and the situation is pushed here by my colleague, Councillor Brest, why are the same bins at times continually missed? Surely when you get a collection that's been missed and you put it through to the crews or you put it through to whatever is on that route, why then do we get the situation where the same bins are missed over 8-9 times? Something's gone wrong somewhere, surely.
So occasionally what happens, and what happened at the beginning of the contract here with our support crews, is where we had the misbins, those weren't put back out to the same crew that missed it in the first place. They were put out to one of the support crews so that we could try and rectify within the 24 to 48 hour period. That process has also been one that we've changed as we've reduced down slightly on the support crews. More of the misbins are going out to the actual crews so they know where they've missed it. But that's part of the reason why we would have repeat misses that come through on occasion, because, for instance, if crew 1 goes out and they miss it on the Monday, it then goes to a support crew for the Tuesday. So crew 1 might not know that they've actually missed it. So next week they would miss it again. Part of the debrief process that we put in place and sending them back to the crews means that they're now made aware of those as they come up.
But surely if I can come back to you, as Councillor Rest says, one bin has been missed 8 times. Now, to me, it's either 8 times weeks or 8 times a fortnight. That's not right either.
I think there are 2 reasons that bins get missed repeatedly. One is lack of crew knowledge. And as a district council, we're dealing with that, and Serco are now dealing with that in terms of their process. And the other is lack of crew performance, if you like. And Serco have got steps in place to deal with that as well. And so it's not acceptable that those bins have been missed repeatedly. And George Roach will tell you that he and I have had numerous conversations where I have expressed my dissatisfaction quite forcibly to Serco in the past. I have confidence that the steps that they are putting in place will resolve the issue. some of that might, involve saying to crews, there is a disciplinary matter here, because if they're not able, with all the information, if they still don't perform, then there has to be some form of sanction taken in order to bring about that improvement. So, that is where I'm pushing Serco now is, an excuse is now no longer good enough. I want to know what you are doing in order to resolve that issue on a permanent, on as permanent basis as you are able to do. So, we have moved the position forward significantly with Serco over the last last month or so.
Okay. Right. Councillor Holiday, you have a second question?
My question is about putting them back, actually, not picking them up. So that I've noticed that the bins don't get put back from whence they were collected. And if you're in a very tight country lane or small area, then they can very easily get in the way of other people. And I would encourage your operatives, for whom I've got huge respect. I think they're great people, do a huge amount of work, but it doesn't help anybody if they don't go back to where they pick them up. Thank you.
If you give us details of where those are, we'll pick that up with the crews. The requirement of the contract is that the bin is returned to the edge of curtilage or to the collection point. If so, there are some differences. So effectively, if it's an assisted bin, so the crews will actually go onto the property in order to collect that bin for elderly, particularly elderly or infirm residents who've been assessed as not being able to move their bin around themselves, then they will return it to the point from which they collected the bin. Otherwise, they will return it to the edge of curtilage. Sometimes that might be a foot or so from where it was collected from, but it should be to the same or similar point on the property that it was collected from. So if there are instances of that, if you tell us about them, then we will raise those with the crews and require an improvement.
Okay, yeah. So if you pass those details over, you might get a direct response on that. Finally, Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I suppose on a positive point, I've had no complaints brought to me in my ward as yet. Doesn't mean it won't happen. And I note the trend lines are going in the right direction. However, I picked up one or two issues, and this is around the assisted collections. There's still too many of them in my view, albeit it's a very small percentage of the total. But when residents have to put notices on the gatepost to remind the crews to actually, that they are actually a assisted collection, it's as the system isn't quite where it should be. Can you give assurances that you can get on top of these final few, assuming these are often the same ones, given they're often vulnerable people who are going to get into panic over this? Thank you.
So one of the areas we have been having a much bigger focus on, and we haven't got it down to zero yet, is the assisted collections. We wouldn't be expecting residents to put anything on the gateposts. Obviously appreciative when they do, but it's not part of the process. What we have done with the assisted collections is they do come up on the guys' tablets that are in the trucks. We've now also printed out all the assisted collections, so they have them in a file. What sometimes lands up happening is the driver operates the tablet inside the truck, the loaders are outside. So if they've got an agency loader or a loader who's not normally on their round for holiday, sickness cover, those sorts of things, is getting that information to the loader is sometimes challenging because the loaders are working away from the truck as they're going down the road. So what we've done is printed those out so that at the beginning of the shift, the drivers can share that information with the loaders to say, when we get to this road, these are the assisted collections that are in there, to try and drive those down. Where we have had missed assisted collections, again, the supervisors are going out specifically to those assisted collections to make sure that the driver and the regular crew are fully aware that those are assisted bins. And that's just to try and prevent when we have either agency loaders or agency drivers, which is why we've then printed them out into an easy to see pack of these are the assisteds for year round, which should help drive those down back to pretty much down to, ideally for assisted collections, we should be at zero. We shouldn't be missing an assisted bin. it's one of the ones that I know Councillor Adams has been pushing us on, and Steve's been pushing us on as well, to make sure that we can drive those down as far as possible. And I'll continue to work with the management team to make sure we can.
Okay, right. I think we've given performance a fair hearing. So I think we understand that we are hoping that we'll arrive at our kind of destination of where we were back in the beginning of September, towards the end of this month, March time. Is that reasonable? Okay. The other matter that we want to hear about was the target operating model and where we are with regard to the gap closure. So I wonder if you can just update us on where we are with that, please.
Yes. So we've had quite a lot of conversations with Serco and with colleagues at other districts. The position we are currently at, and I'm really pleased to say, is that we have for a number of those outstanding elements agreed that they can be delivered either via a different means, or have they were offers that Serco made in the first instance that probably weren't ever, they didn't really add value to what we were looking at doing as authorities. So there have been some where we have agreed that they can be discounted and not continued. There are some we've agreed can be delivered in a different methodology in order to suit changes that have come about through, you know, various changes in the landscape in which we operate, so COVID related or just change in practice. And for a number of the others, we have agreed a delivery timetable, or we're in the process of agreeing a final delivery timetable. That came through a couple of weeks ago, but there were some slight errors in dates between what had been discussed and what had been put on the sheet. They were obvious errors, to be honest with you. So there were some bits that had been put down, I think with some, I don't know whether it was you with the fat fingers, George, but there were some that were designed for 23 and had been put down as 25, etc. So
wasn't Excel dragging issue.
Yeah. So
unfortunately, that drag cells across, and they went
23. So and that was across the 3 districts. So yeah, there were just some bits that we're tidying up, but effectively we now have an agreed position around all of the outstanding elements, either in terms of a delivery timetable, or that they will be done in a different method. And the ones that have been we've agreed that can be done in a different method, Serco have shared that methodology with us, and we as 3 authorities are just in the process of discussing those and reaching an agreement. Those are things just for clarity. So some of the community engagement activity, Serco had said they would employ a community engagement liaison person who would basically set up groups and activity, etc. And what's become apparent is the 3 districts, in terms of how they operate, all have arrangements in place where coming and putting something over the top would duplicate and not fit comfortably for any of us. Serco have therefore proposed a number of activities that would support what we all currently do. It would achieve the same outcome that was originally proposed in the in their bid submission, but it will achieve that via a slightly different route. So for the community engagement, you know, there is a commitment that they will provide engagement in schools, engagement in community groups, collection of where litter picking groups operate. They would go out and collect from that notified place, irrespective of sort of the quantity and type. And so, you know, that the original offer has been replicated, but via a different route of delivery. And I think as officers, we were comfortable with the proposals that have come forward. There's just a bit of negotiation to finish off as to how that will actually be, you know, how some of those will be delivered, and clarifying some detail in what some of the offer means. But that is nearing conclusion. So I'm really pleased to report that from my perspective, I think we are close to resolving the gap analysis activity to a point at which it's then a question of some of that timetable delivery coming forward. And I think all of that is scheduled by sort of October, November of this year. Is that right? Much of it is before then. Some of it's being delivered in the next month or so. But I think the longest dates are to sort of October, November 23, and that's around some of the more complicated activity to actually get it in place and up and running.
Okay, so just to summarize that, then from your point of view as the client, you are comfortable that the gaps that were there have been addressed, and or there are remedies that are planned that will take you to a point where you will be comfortable as the client, and that's not something that we need to dwell on in the future. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would suggest that if you wanted to look at this again at a future date, a future waste update, maybe just a short section on are you on timetable to deliver would be more than adequate. But I don't think it needs handling in the short term.
Okay, that's I think an acceptable arrangement that we can reach in the future. One other matter that certainly has been brought to my attention, and that is the introduction of the battery collection. From my round of parish councils in the last couple of weeks, there does seem to be a, I suppose I would say, a low profile to that, and I think that is causing some concern about quite how that's going to be done, what's required specifically of those people putting them out. Do they put them out with the green bin? Do they put them out with the black bin? What kind of bags and all kinds of perhaps detail that I'm not sure has been covered. So I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
So battery collections rolled out beginning of the month, and we put the information out on social media originally. So battery collections can take place every week. They can go on either bin. Batteries go in a small freezer size bag that gets put on top of the bin, and then the guys collect it at the same time as the bins, basically. So bins go in the back, batteries go into a cage on the side. We will be launching a small wee collection service, and that's launching the end of this month. We'll be rolling that out in a very much a phased approach. And the reason why we're doing it in a phased approach is we don't want to overwhelm all the crews at the same time. So basically we'll be putting it forward on effectively it's a week by week. So one round will go in week 1, then another round in week 2, so we can support them as they go. What we found historically from other councils is when we launch a small wee services, we have an influx of a lot of items coming out. What we've putting out in our communication and our frequently asked questions is this is small wee, so ideally nothing bigger than a 2-slice toaster. So if residents are asking to put out, giant size hoovers and television screens, please not. We just don't have the space on the lorries to do it. The other element that we're looking at is little and often. The cages on the lorries are small. It's not a whole lorry to collect batteries and wee. So it's a case of, if you're putting them out every week pretty much, but only putting a couple out, it means we can get all the residents through on there. But the battery collections we're on social media. There is a frequently asked questions guide. What we'll be doing with the wee is there'll be bin hangers going out the week before we start doing a specific round. So the crews will put the bin hangers out to inform those residents that this will be coming to you next week. I believe I need to just double check, but I believe there's a QR code on the bin hanger that directs through to a frequently asked questions page on what we can take, how often we'll be doing it, and any other questions regarding the small wee collection service.
So Serco efforts then have been based on social media?
For the battery collections, they were based around social media.
So what about a lot of our residents that are not engaged in social media, and some of them don't even engage in internet activity very much either.
So the decision we made around the launch of the battery process, and it's similar to the WE, is what you tend to find is that you have a significant number of people who will go, well, I've got a big bag of batteries, I've saved them up for ages, and therefore I'm going to, I'll put them all out at once. What we actually found, we had a number of people ringing in and said, well, I put my batteries out and they weren't collected. And why was that? And I think there was a degree to which some crews had, they'd been briefed, they'd been trained, but didn't necessarily pick them all up. But equally, so many batteries were presented in that first week. I understand that some of the crews actually filled their battery cages and so had to leave batteries behind. In terms of the process around batteries, now we've got it out, and there is a the service is now running. We will begin to ramp up communications around it. So we're going to look at doing some information to people in the next bin calendars that will be going out in March, I think it is. So there will be more information going out to people, to residents, about the services that we are offering. The small WE, so that's the waste electrical equipment. So it is sort of anything that is electronic. That has the potential, if we were to launch it on a mass launch, to cause significant difficulties for the crews just with the volume presented. And so we are looking at rolling that out on a much more step-by-step controlled basis to different rounds. And then once it's in and around, they will continue to pick up, because it will deal with that peak of everyone saying, well, I've got hundreds of bits of this, and I'll put it all out at once. Because the space on the vehicles is very limited. So there will be more direct communication with residents on that, because we will be doing it on a round by round or an area by area basis, and that will enable us to control that in a way that provides to be able to put the bin hangers on without creating too much demand for the service all at once. Well, too much demand, we hope. I do expect we will outstrip demand in the first sort of phases of launch, but we will certainly have plans in place to deal with that. So there will be more coming, Chair.
Good. So we're going to be using our comms team, are we, for that? It does seem to me that there is scope there to give this a much stronger message, to make sure that the launch is well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we launched the battery, the comms were agreed across the 3 districts. They were shared with all of the comms teams. Our comms team has put out quite a lot of social media and information through the website, etc. So we will look how we manage that. I think there'll be less on social media for the initially for the rollout of the small WE. The reason being is that because we want to control the rollout step by step, if we put it out on social media, it will cause confusion as to whether it applies in this area or that area, this round or the other. If you said round 3, George, if I said to George round 3 on a Tuesday, he'd know exactly the route it was doing. But if I said to anyone out there round 3 on a Tuesday, well, I don't know what round 3 does on a Tuesday, to be honest with you, off the top of my head. So we don't want to cause confusion and mispresentation of WE. So we will manage that initially, and then once it's out in all the areas, we will then follow up with social media in order to make sure that people are aware and maximise the take up of that service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the batteries, I agreed that we should have a slow rollout of this service, and the same with the WE. They come in consecutive months, but I did some research recently. There's estimated to be something like 40 million waste items of small WE sitting languishing in people's shelves and cupboards. If you rolled it out in a big bang type of approach, that just wouldn't work. So, I'm sorry that your parish councils weren't aware. That is kind of a deliberate thing.
members were advised, and it's like drip feeding this in, so that if everybody put their batteries, a bag of batteries out on the same week, they'd be disappointed anyway. And some already have been disappointed because the cages were full, and that is what I'm aware of. So it is very much drip feeding this in. It will be followed up with the bin hangers and more comms as we roll through the year once this service settles down. But I'm actually really proud that this council or this administration is introducing these new services. It's particularly with batteries finding their way into the sorting centres, it causes real safety hazards for people. But not only that, on the environmental front, in a world where these materials are becoming more and more scarce, it makes perfect sense for them to be recycled back into new products, instead of just discarding and ended up in landfill or incinerated. So I'm pleased that it's being rolled out. It will be a bit of a slow process, but and for the reasons I've just explained. And just to close on that, I'd like to thank George for coming along today. It's not easy to face the music after the target operating model problems that we've had. I'd like to say that I'm not happy with the way it's occurred, but I'm pleased to see the progress. The amount of resource and time that members of the environmental team have put into this really was unacceptable. That we shouldn't have had to do that. And of course, while they're focusing on these reported issues, they're not doing the other jobs that in other services as well. So I've actually gone out a few times. I had one 94-year-old lady who lives down a remote lane, and she's an assisted collection, and her bin is 50 metres from the roadway. It's a lane actually, and she got in touch with me after having her bin missed twice, one green and one black. And so I asked her just to follow the normal procedure, and it was very much a test. And then I sat with her one morning having a cup of tea, and the guy turned up. He collected the bin on the third week. He knocked on the door. He apologized profusely. This is back in November, actually. So the system, I could see that the system was working. Is it perfect? No, I'm not saying it is, but to suggest that there's a massive problem with Serco isn't true when 99.8% of bins are collected every week out of the 70,000 collections. So I'm not happy, but I'm pleased to see this returning back to normal. I'll be glad when we get back to the pre-Tom levels. And Serco knows that. We have some difficult meetings, Steve and I, with Serco, and we're pleased now to see the improvements that they're delivering. But it's taken too long, in fairness, and it's not what I was hoping for. But appreciate your scrutiny here today on it, because it all helps to keep Serco's pencils sharpened, shall we say. So thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Just to pick up on a couple of points that you've mentioned, I haven't heard the word massive mentioned this morning, which is good. Only when you mentioned it. What I think we have heard is that the performance was a significant problem, and has been eased to a much better place. But what we're really interested in is, when are we going to get down to those pre-September levels? So I think that's what we're really about today. When are we going to get to that point? And I think we've got a better idea of when that's likely to happen. Just on the matter of the electricals, I think the context of the comments that I've picked up is that I mean, the merits of the scheme, I think people recognise, and that's not an issue. I think the context of that was people would like, I think, to have known more about the type of rollout. I think people would understand that you don't start a new service on a day and then it applies across the whole district, and you would want to do that in a phased fashion. So I think it's really about getting that publicity out. Some people have heard about it, some people hadn't. You know, it was the scale of that, if you like, that I've picked up in the last couple of weeks. And I just am assured by what Mr. Hems has said with regard to what we will be doing with our own comms team and the sort of multimedia efforts that will be made to make sure that we reach a lot of those communities that, you know, are not socially orientated, social media orientated. So that was really the thrust of my point there. Right, okay, we've given this a good airing, I think, and unless anybody's got any last minute desperate points they want to make, I think we'll close the matter at this point. And we are asked to receive and to note the briefing. Are you content to do that? Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you. That looks unanimous to me. So thank you, Mr. Roach, and we look forward to being in a better place very shortly, very soon. And we will pick up on, I think, a revisit to where we are. Well, I would hope it wouldn't be on the scale that we've had to do today.
Chair, just for your information and members' information, this will be the last time that George comes and is with you, not because he's not wanting to come back, but he's actually been promoted within Serco, and so is going off to be the regional director for the southeast, southwest.
Calling it the west, but it's actually south.
So
is where it is.
So you'll be looking at this from a different perspective, then, will you?
I do still have his personal phone number, but at the moment, Serco are going through some recruitment, and we're expecting them to come back to us next week with so that's internal activity. And it's yeah, we're hoping that we will have someone in place very shortly, but George is doing some handover, so he's currently doing 2 jobs at the moment. And yeah, so by the time we get to the next update, it will be someone different that comes and presents.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Roach, for that, and congratulations on your promotion. So yeah, we'll be hearing more from Mr. Hems in due course in any event. All right, thanks very much indeed. Right, moving on then, if we may, to item 11, which is the North Walsham High Street Heritage Action Zone project update. Councillor Kershaw.
Thank you, Chair. The report's before you. There are a few updates subsequent to this report. I can report that we now have a project manager in place, Lou Robson, who joined us on the 23rd of January and is fitting in very well. We have 3 new businesses that have opened in Marketplace since the new year, which I'm very pleased to report. Progress in the Marketplace. We had some holdups before Christmas with weather, and we discovered a sinkhole recently, which was actually located, identified and fixed within 24 hours, and it was a water main. It didn't impact on any of the work we'd done. It didn't need any remedial work, and since that point, we have overachieved our block rate laying, and we started on the 13th of this month on the work on Church Lane. The wall around the Black Swan Loke has been demolished, and the small buildings within that site removed, and the works have started now on the Vicarage Road car park. So I'm pleased to say that progress has been made since this report. The figures you requested are in this report, and any questions, there are officers here that would answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kershaw. I think before we move into the detail, I think you will be familiar that this committee was looking for a breakdown of the 400,000 that was granted back in December. Now, I may have missed it, but can you direct me to where that breakdown is in the papers today?
I think it's fair to pass that to officers that we have been working with, Officer Turvey and the Director of Place, and they are in a better position than I to answer that specific question.
Well, before I do that, I think it's reasonable to ask you as a cabinet member, do you understand the breakdown of where that 400,000 is being spent?
I understand the issues with costing that breakdown. Some of it is commercially now, because we've had some of the parts of that breakdown are over the delegated limit, so they've had to go to commercial quotation. So as a matter, they are confidential. The work is proceeding, and once those contracts have been awarded, those specific figures will be forthcoming.
Okay, so can I just, before we leave you for a moment, so do you know that breakdown?
Within parameters, yes. Whether those quotations come back to the figures we're expecting, that's what we're waiting to see. But I am happy with the way that property services have helped and structured those breakdowns. Yes.
Okay. I mean, I don't raise this this matter for sort of academic reasons. There is a very practical aspect to this. In order to understand the justification for such a sum of money, it is reasonable to have an understanding about how they arise. And I have to say that at the moment, I'm only able to kind of look at this in three lumps. I see 228.8K, which is basically towards the marketplace and Cedars. And then we've got two other sums, which seem to be with Black Swan Loke and the bank Loke. And below that, I can't see any further detail. Now, if I've missed it, then
No, you haven't missed it, but as explained, because the cost of the first two sections of Black Swan Loke are higher than our delegated sums, we've had to go out to quotation. So until we get the actual figures, it would be speculative, and also it would be confidentially ridiculous, really, because it would give tenderers and quoters an idea.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I've got Councillor Toy, who seems to be keen to ask a question before I move on to.
No, it's not a question, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to help you. Page 48 on mine's the electronic version. Page 2 of 2. Is that what you're looking for? Page 1 and 2, page 2 of 2.
No, John, I think there's actually the two units, the figures that I understand from the chair that he's looking at were the two lines responding to Black Swan Loke and the Black Loke, which don't have the breakdown. That's what.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to see if that was helpful. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. No, I'm. Yeah. Okay. I think we've clarified that. Right. Officers, then, if we can just pursue that point on the breakdown of the sums.
So I'll speak. So we've got no Rob Young today, so I'll pick up what I can, and Martin as well. So there probably isn't a great more to say than what Richard has said. So Richard Kershaw said the arrival of that figure of 228,000, which is still to be tested. We've mentioned about the Anglian waterworks that needs to be done. That does have an impact, but we are waiting for what that impact looks like, which we should have from our quantity surveyor in the next few days. That's where that 228,000 arrives from. So essentially, this isn't, you're not going to get a breakdown of exactly what that looks like, because actually it's as a result, as has been stated by Officer Young before, of overspend occurring prior to that point. And then in terms of the Lokes, we are presently awaiting for some figures for those tenders. And if we were to provide any more detail than that, then we might prejudice those tenders and quotes.
Well, I guess, and I take your point about confidentiality, commercial confidentiality, but this committee is well used to seeing purple papers before now. So I just wonder to what extent that might be included in that form.
Well, we haven't chosen to take that today, but we could, to be quite honest, imminently within the next couple of weeks, we will have those figures anyway, and we would obviously be happy to bring that back to ONS at that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say that request has been made on repeated occasions. First of all, at December Cabinet, and then at overview and scrutiny in December, and then before full council. So there's been a lot of kind of notice given to this, and I'm just a little concerned, I suppose, that we haven't kind of looked laterally at kind of how can we then provide this information in a very limited form or a restricted form, a confidential form. I don't really mind, but what I'm kind of feeling is that it's just not happening. And I didn't really understand why. And I think it's important that we do understand as a committee why that is.
If I could comment, Chair, I mean, I don't know if you've been out in the field at the moment, but trying to get quotations, fewer and fewer people are actually quoting because of the rise in costs and materials. So getting quotes back is a longer process than it has been before. I'd love to have the quotes in, I'd love to finish the work. But until we get the quotes through, we can't start the fundamental work, and it is taking time for, and builders are, as you've seen, we have lost builders, they're going out of business as well. And as prices carry on rising, I think we've done very well to hold this to 16% increase when many other projects, not as advanced as this, are suffering rates of inflation at higher than 48%. So that's where we are.
No, that's accepted. I do understand that. But until you've mentioned that this morning, I'm not sure that I've seen anywhere else where that's been highlighted to us. Not even in this report. So I'm just kind of trying to put that into, you know, a context of what we have to do, which is
no, I can see that. But the problem you have is an instability at the moment, which we haven't suffered over the last decade or so, of contractors teetering and disappearing, and it's very hard.
Understood. Yeah, understood. I think most of us will understand that that particular issue is one that would cause concern to all projects, and you know, even for us having domestic work, it applies equally. So we're no strangers to that. But I think what it's about is trying to, as I said, reach some clarity around what is this, you know, how did we get to 400,000? What are the elements of that? Because they didn't just come magic out of the air, I'd imagine. They would come out of,
they were estimations, you know,
they come from the ground upwards, rather than starting at the top. And that's really the
I think to be honest there, we are approaching the end of this project. So within the next couple of months, we will be able to draw down and actually show the final sums.
Yeah. But I think that's fine. I think we were, I think, aware that we could go back, or if you like, we could pick that up at a later date. But when it comes to a request for 400,000, and when it comes to this committee expressing a view about that, in other words, doing its proper scrutiny, that's the kind of level of detail that we were lacking and were hoping that we would have by the time we got to full council. But okay, I think we've dealt with that one for now. Other questions on this paper then, please? Councillor Cushing.
Well, just an observation before I start, Mr. Chairman. I endorse what you said. It does feel very much, it's like trying to get blood out of a stone at time, particularly around the finances, what's happening on this project. We hear often, and we look at the reports in front of us, and everything seems to be hunky-dory, yet we know from information we receive in the background and what we read in the press, actually all is not necessarily well. So I look forward to seeing those figures. As you said, we've actually asked for those for, I think 3 or 4 months ago now, and both at our views and scrutiny at Cabinet, I think both you and I mentioned that, and certainly it was raised at the last full council. If I may move on, sort of looking at the information around it, at the last overview and scrutiny meeting, I asked, when you look at the delivery of the report, to understand what is happening on the project. I'm pleased to see that they've actually split the report into the various areas, but in order for us to get an understanding of how well it's going, it would be helpful, I think, if under each subheading, you had actually what is the outcome the project is actually trying to achieve in that area, and if it's on track or not. Because when I read this, I get a lot of nitty-gritty detail about removing guttering and soil pipes or whatever. Well, that doesn't really mean much to me. Overall, this committee really needs to understand, is that element of work on track? What are the key milestones in there? And is it on track on regards to the budget? The other observation I will make is the risk register. which I'd ask members quickly to glance over while we're talking. I mean, that is exceedingly poor, and you can tell that at a glance because it is utterly threadbare. There's no information on that. A risk is, in project terms, is defined as something that may happen, which would have an adverse impact. Well, if you look at the descriptions down there, normally you put that in your actual description. Well, if you look at some of those, I mean, you just read them out. The description is lack of commitment to deliver and fund sustainable energy performance when completed. But what's the impact of that and what are you trying to deliver? And that's how you know what, then you actually detail what actions are being used in order to mitigate that. And the other thing is I don't understand is why you've actually got two sets of RAD ratings on there, because the risk register is actually a living document. So therefore it should just have one risk rating on there. So I'd like to make a recommendation that actually, as far as the risk register is concerned, that we refer this with the approval of the chairman of GRAC to the GRAC committee for review and comment and feedback to the project.
Okay, thank you. So who wants to respond to the points that Councillor Cushing has raised? You want to respond? Sorry? Well, I'm looking for an officer response.
No, I think they're good comments. That's always good feedback. You know, that's what we want from OB and Scrutiny. So we'll definitely take those on board. In terms of the
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just that was a response I got last time I raised it, I think back in September, and nothing much has happened since.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the risk register, you said there were two. You said there were two statuses. I think one is a reflection of the risk itself, and then one is what that status is after mitigation, i.e., something can go from a red to a green following mitigation. Is that the point?
If you actually mitigated it, then obviously there's no need to have the original risk rating on there. It's actually what is it currently doing now? That's the thing you want to understand. The reader wants to understand, whether it be this or anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other? Do you wish to respond, Mr. Folger, or not? No.
No, that is the explanation. It's to show once the risk has been assessed and if the actions are able to mitigate the residual risks, hence the two different colours. So it's quite deliberate to show that the mitigations will be effective.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kershaw, do you know?
No, I'm content.
Councillor Holiday.
Well, I second that request for the risk register to go to GRAC. I mean, my question is, some of the mitigations are quite stupendous. If I was a cardiac surgeon, I'd be absolutely thrilled with the results that I was getting, I must say. I mean, one of them goes, I mean, there's numbers of 11, for example, one of them goes from 20 to 12, 12 to 1, 25 to 9. I think that's really impressive. And I'm afraid I'd like a little bit of assurance that those mitigations really are that effective. That's one question. And there's one that concerned me somewhat with the cedars, which was the risk about demand, which would seem the whole point of doing up the cedars was so that you're going to let it successfully. And I'm a bit concerned that we've still got a residual risk of 9 on that. But I would certainly like this scrutinised again, please. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone want to respond on those?
We'll certainly I'll take those points on board myself, and I'll speak to the team after this meeting.
I think it's fair to say, Chair, that we've always said that this should go before GRAC as the project. There's nothing to hide. Absolutely, we've said that before, and I maintain that that's where it will go.
Can I just note, Chairman, that there was a previous recommendation for the project to be reviewed in relation to the project governance framework that is due to go to GRAC in March. So if I speak to the officers preparing that review, then potentially we could get the risk register added to that if the recommendation is approved.
I think that's a fair point, and I do recall that that was what we agreed last meeting. I do think that the province of the finer points of the risk register and the kind of lessons that we can learn out of that, not just from this project point of view, but from the point of view of operating risk registers. That I think there's two aspects to this. There's there's that deeper level of drilling down with respect to this project and the managing of risk and the mitigation measures and control measures that have been not only taken, but also recorded here, and how it's presented so that we can get the best out of it, so that it's the most informative and easiest to read. And so they're the kind of things that I would expect to, Brad could probably help us with. So if that we'll pick that up at the end in any event. Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just think that we're asked to receive and note updates today, which is fine. We understand that it's a long-running project, but also through you, Mr. Chairman, this committee has asked, as you so eloquently put, for 4 or 5 months now, a concise update. Can we note the fact that it's causing us concern? Because obviously that's what I get from you this morning as chairman of this committee, that you're a little concerned, and I think all of us are correctly, that we're still not getting clear figures. Thank you.
I think the minutes will show that, actually, certainly, and the frequency with which this committee is seeing these updates is a reflection of the fact that we are concerned. So I think to some extent that's kind of self-evident, and I think the nature of our dialogue today and the contributions that are being made do reflect that. So, Mr. Folger.
Yeah, it's just a matter of timing. I think we should be clear about that. There was full intention to bring the detailed figures about the Lokes to this meeting. If that had been possible, it just simply wasn't possible. They weren't provided to us. And of course, to meet the deadlines for this committee, we had to provide the papers some time ago. Ideally, we wouldn't have come here today. We would have come at a later meeting. We would have had those figures for you. So it's just a matter of timing. There's nothing more to it than that. It's nothing untowards. Nothing's being hidden. It's just a simple fact that we don't have that information to be able to break it down to you as yet. Last time we were here, it was at committee, it was to seek permission to have more money for the budget, and we gave estimated figures, which we stick by. And obviously we've now gone out to tender for those works, which is why we cannot provide that information at this current time. But we will have that information, and we're more than willing to bring it back, of course, in a more detailed outline. So it's just timing. So I don't think I don't want this committee to have the impression that those figures are being hidden in some way, or just we're not listening to the request. It's just we weren't able to do it because it just wasn't possible.
I take your point on that, and we may have another conversation when we've got to that point. So we may have a reflective, if you like, conversation on that. But let's wait until we get there. Officer Snakely.
Yeah, we have actually got the figures, I think, on pages 47 and 48. But having sat here and worked through them, I think I would be one of the first to say that they're not that easily understandable. And so I will take this away and work with Rob and his team to look at presenting them in a more understandable format. But what we're seeing here is that we've got land purchase costs, we've got the total design and management fee, we've got the direct purchase materials costs, to give us the total cost there. And then we've got the anticipated final works costs, which are tarmacs costs of 1,713,000. So we've got anticipated total final cost there of 2.6. And then on page 48, we've got the income of how it's been funded, the project of 2,297,000. The restocking of materials and the potential reallocation of funds, those two I don't think should be negative, giving a grand total of what the budget gap is, the 228, and then the two target budgets for Black Swan Loke and Bank Loke, given us our 400,000 that we've been here to before to discuss. So we have got them, but I do think that we could have presented them better and had I perhaps seen this earlier, I would have rejigged it so it was a bit more easily understood. If anybody wants to ask anything on that, I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Can I just ask a question then in relation on page 19, where it speaks about the cedars and the second line of that, it uses an expression which I'm not familiar with, which is measured term contract. What is that? Someone, please.
I may be able to help with that. So the council has a contract that it uses where rates for a number of things have been agreed with a contractor. So that contractor is therefore able to be used for different works across the authority without the need to go out for further procurement on an individual.
An approved contractor list.
It's more than that. It's more than that because actually the contractor is a contractor that is engaged to fulfill the measured term contract. So it is with one contractor, but effectively it's a framework under which the prices have already been procured.
That would be really helpful if we have a kind of understanding of that. Yes, thank you. It was not a term that I'm familiar with, and there were looks of I think equal absence of understanding around as well. So yes, Councillor Adam.
Another way of describing it might be a small works contract. So this has been in place for a number of years with the Malcolm Abs contractors. So enabling a sort of flexibility to carry out repair projects and smaller building projects, sort of, unlike the scale of, say, a new toilet build or something, but where the works are relatively straightforward.
There are various ways of describing it to us lay people, I think, rather than a measured term contract. But anyway, I now understand that, so thank you for that. Any other questions in relation to this? Oh, Councillor Fredericks, did you have a question? No? Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, well, from the discussion I think we've had so far, I think we have a recommendation that the risk register is referred to GRAC for basically two reasons, really. One is to go into a deeper level than we are able to today with regard to how the risks are managed, mitigated, controlled, and how that information is presented to us in a risk register form. So we are asked today to receive and note the update, but in addition to that, we have that recommendation from Councillor Cushing. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Oh, beg your pardon. I didn't notice, sorry. So I've got a proposer and a seconder. Can I have a show of hands then in support of that being passed to GRAC? Can you put your mic on, please?
I thought we had discussed that this would be part of the HAS review that is already going to GRAC, and that the officer Matt would be asking for that to be included as a wider.
I'm just saying that if the committee is supportive, then I can ask for it to be added to the review that's already taken place. So it would still require approval of that recommendation.
Okay.
So this is about getting that approval. All right. So with that clarification, what we are asked to do is to receive and note the update, and then the recommendation that the risk register be passed to GRAC for those two purposes. Okay, that's the proposal. Could a show of hands then, please, in support of that? That looks unanimous to me. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on then to item 12, that's the Planning Service Improvement Plan Action Plan. Councillor Brown, do you wish to introduce this?
I'd prefer the officers to introduce it, Mr. Chairman, and then if I could be allowed to address the committee, I'd be very grateful after the presentation.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Officer Folger.
Thank you, Chair. So this planning service improvement plan work will be familiar to this committee. So we're coming to you today, hopefully at the culmination of the works. So the strategy has been revised, the main document, and it now includes the detailed action plan, which is being put forward to address those issues that Overview and Scrutiny had raised as the priorities. Max here is going to take us through some slides which will set out where we are, what's been done and what's going to be done. There's been an awful lot of work since I've last been here, but Max will talk you through that. We've got a short presentation for you and I'm happy to take any questions after that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Officer Collis.
Thank you.
Otherwise you won't be audible on YouTube.
Thank you. Okay. Planning service improvement planning, improving customer experience. So this is just a sort of tour of what we've been doing since Martin brought the draft strategy to you. Keep going. So, okay, that's fine. The key issues for the planning service improvement plan. I'm going to briefly touch on the progress we've been making since the last ONS meeting, what Martin reported on, and the consultation results. So through October and November, we went to public consultation and consultation with town and parish councils. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on the results of that and the approach taken through the action plan. Next one, there's two more. You can click them up. So the key objectives of that action plan and the outcomes as we've listed them in the strategy. Next one. So the key issues that were picked up from Overview and Scrutiny meeting was the speed of decision making, needs to be faster. Communication with stakeholders and members was key. The provision and access to information and the alignment of planning and sustainable growth interests. Okay, so since the OS meeting, which I think was September or was it October? September. We undertook 2 external consultation exercises. These were put into Outlook and we did quite a heavy social media exercise to get input, and it's quite clear actually. It's interesting to see that as soon as Felix was pushing out those Facebook and Twitter prompts, that you'd get a flurry of information back. So it worked really well for us, but it was in Outlook as well, and that also raised some responses. Following that, obviously we had quite a few responses and we needed to develop the action plan. Some of the quick wins we implemented, so some of the things have already started taking place and just laying the groundwork for the improvements that we need to make. And vacant posts were filled where possible. So we have been doing some recruitment to spread the load. You can put that. Okay, so public consultation, we had 117 responses. It was open for a month. Of all of those, we asked for postcodes so we could see where those responses were coming from. They were all local responses that were made in our 28 and in our 21 were key. So that's probably our two key towns. Without a doubt, communication needs improving. People want to see clearer websites. They want to see and understand. I think there was a lot of confusion about the planning process and how it works and not understanding. I haven't been in planning very long. There's an awful lot of acronyms used and a lot of language that isn't as easy for everyone to understand. So we need to do something about that. The speed of process also came up, fewer extensions of time and better management of the consultation process. And there was quite a few responses relating to enforcement. From the town and parish councils that had longer, they had about 6 weeks to respond to us. We had 53 responses in total, and similarly to the public consultation, the key points were around improved communications and interactions, the ability to speak to someone, receiving decision notices, and a sort of understanding of the issues that come up. They've also highlighted training and guidelines to help them understand the planning process, particularly when they've got new council members or new clerks. Improvements to the planning web pages, improved enforcement of breaches of planning control, and updates on planning news and issues affecting parishes. So that was the sort of call from them. It was quite comprehensive, quite a lot of things that they wanted further information on, sort of things like material considerations, just to improve their understanding. Next one. You can click it once more, isn't it? Okay. So there's quite a lot of words in the next few slides, so I won't go through it, but I will, Matt, if you want to load it up afterwards to make it available. So the action plan was a case of looking at the evidence and then creating a plan to bring about those changes. And it wasn't all about external. There was part of this was obviously you raised was the decision-making process. So the whole team went under a series of workshops created by the Planning Advisory Service to basically look at good practice and see how we measure up. So it was an honest appraisal, and I can tell you from now they were very honest in those appraisals of how well they felt they were doing, how we could bring about changes. So it was really useful for me as a non-planner in the team to understand their perceptions and to be able to bring about a transformation of how that can be done. So it's two elements to that. I have been reporting to the Town and Parish Council Forum, so I'm keeping them up to date on progress. The action plan has to involve the whole team. We won't get that change of how we do things without the whole team being involved. So there are various officers at different levels that will be taking forward different tasks within this action plan. And I, with my project management role, or as a previous project manager, will be obviously keeping the boat afloat and moving in the same direction with Martin and Philip's and Jeff's support. I think there was other things on there, but don't worry, Matt. Okay, so there are a lot of tasks. I have mulled this over with the projects. There's project bits in it, but most of these are tasks. For example, we recently brought about ensuring decision notices or decision emails are sent out to town and parish council. That's a task. So it's not, there are a lot of tasks rather than a lot of projects, which is why we haven't gone down the project management route, just in case you were wondering. But I will be managing that whole process throughout. And one more. So the original strategy talks about people, process and performance, and it's very heavily weighted towards the people elements. And none of this is rocket science. It is good practice, and we do need to rethink how we engage with different people in different places and at different times. So there is a whole plethora of tasks that we will be engaged in improving to ensure that we deliver on those. Process planning is obviously a heavy process related service. But it's not always clear how that works and why there are delays and how decisions are being made. So that's something that I will be helping to bring out to the public and to town parish councils to make that easier to understand. And performance, because performance is important. We obviously have the usual planning related performance, but we will be putting into place some customer services related performance. So we know how we're doing and that we can see that any failures are dealt with promptly and efficiently. Okay, so what we wanted to concentrate on is is what the end product will look like. What will this feel like and be like to you as members, to the town and parish councils, and to the general public? Because it's not just about a task list, it's not about ticking those boxes, it's about actually what we're delivering. So that's why we have tried to make these tasks smart from the point of view is actually what do we want this to feel like at the other end. And I think that's also really important with engaging officers to understand that, because nobody turns up to work to want to do a job, to do a bad job. Nobody comes up to work to want to feel criticised or that they're not doing things properly. So everyone is behind this, and we do want to see those changes. And in the strategy document, we have put them as outcomes. Next one. I'm sure. No, I haven't. Thank you. Any questions? That was a bit of a whistle stop tour. Was that okay?
Okay, yeah, that takes us, I think, neatly through it. Yes, I've got one question. I can just kick off, please. It's always good to see the label on the tin, improving the customer experience. That's always a good start. From what you've described and from what I understand, the customer experience has been mainly around district councillors, town and parish councils, members of the public, but I haven't seen developers mentioned, I haven't seen architects mentioned, I haven't seen agents mentioned, and I'm mindful that a lot of our applications come from all of those sources. In fact, a lot of our delivery comes from those sources. And my recollection was that we had a difficulty, I think, in going back to those people some while ago when we first launched this. So where is their customer experience included in this, or is that something yet to be added on at a later point?
No, it's quite a fundamental part of this. So as part of this process, developer forums are being created. So we'll be inviting specifically developers, agents, professionals in the field to come and engage with us. It'll be part learning, it'll be part about talking around new policies, new procedures, updates of where we are as a planning service, but also receiving direct feedback. So that it is part of the planning service improvement plan, and it is within it. So there will be a number. I think we're recommending quarterly forums at the moment, but we'll listen to our developers and see how often they want to engage in that way. But they are a fundamental part of this.
So if I've understood you correct, that's for the future, isn't it? Because that's listed in your action plan.
Yeah.
So my question really was, have their input been included in this experience evidence base?
Yeah, so some of the customers that we've asked, they're not just members of the public, they're applicants, some of which are developers themselves. So they have been included so far, but we're looking at a rolling programme. There's only so much we could do between September and now. But what we'd like to do is every single application that goes out will be offering the opportunity for direct feedback. So not just from members of the public, but from our applicants, agents, and those who submit planning applications, our statutory consultees. So it'll be a frequent and constant request. At the moment, we do not ask them how has the experience been unless we do a specific survey. What we're moving to now is something, it'll be routine. So it'll be a constant mechanism. And I think that's a more effective way than lots of small hits where sometimes that's the wrong way to do it. I think we need to be on our game throughout the year. And this way we'll ensure that will happen.
Okay, thank you. My second question is in relation to enforcement. And if I understood you right, Officer Collis, you mentioned that the members of the public actually had quite a lot to say about enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look in the action plan, and I may have missed it, but I see only, I think, on the last page of the action plan, so I'm looking at page 59, there are 2 items there that relate to enforcement, but they seem to relate more to matters of process with regard to enforcement more than what the public might. I don't know what the public comments were, but I would suspect, from what I am aware, that they would have some concerns about the speed of enforcement, the sort of process of enforcement and so forth. So is there more to be done in terms of enforcement here?
So taking you back to what your key aims were, it wasn't to review the enforcement service as such, but as part of the survey, as you've quite rightly pointed out, we did receive some feedback that the public would like to see enforcement quicker. Reading the comments, it's more a case of not understanding the steps that are necessary when enforcement is into play. There is a general feeling, unfortunately, that if somebody has committed a breach of planning, that the council can come along within days, it's remedied, you know, it's removed, it's offsite. It doesn't work that way. So it's a matter of education, and this plan, the action plan, is centered on that education and communication. I think first of all, we've got to have a greater understanding of what we're able to do, timescale, so the public can understand better. At the moment, they don't understand. So that's a failing on our part. And I think a failing in planning generally, not just at North Norfolk. When it comes to the actual planning performance and planning enforcement, then yes, that is a process one, is can we do anything quicker internally? We're unable to move statutory and legislative timescales, and we're unable to jump through hoops that we're unable to do. But are we able to respond quicker? Are we be able to pick up the phone quicker? This plan will take care of that. But I think coupled with the communications, we will address, and it was only a small number. So although it's been reported, it's not like as if we had thousands of people tell us. We had one or two, which is a very, very small number. And this is, sorry.
And since we did the public consultation, they've recruited 2 new people. So for a small team, that's going to make a significant difference.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. We've now got a conditions monitoring officer in place, which is to front load enforcement. So that's a real positive step. Rather than wait for the phone to ring to tell us somebody's not done something correctly, we've now got officer on the ground who's looking at, once a permission's been granted, are they setting off? Is it in the right place already? Are the bricks the right type? You know, are the conditions being complied with? We've also got a trainee enforcement officer now in post, about to be trained. We've still got our 2 substantive enforcement officers and a team leader. We're now fully resourced. So I think you'll see a real pickup. And as the portfolio holder sees every month, our live cases are dropping and the speed of responses is increasing, which is matching the general planning performance as well, which is very good. You know, I must say, this is not a failing service. This action plan is looking to push us to the upper echelons. It's not because we're a poor council, far from it, in fact. And this is really just sharpening us up across the board.
I think that's probably music to many members' ears, actually, because most members, I think, will relate. A couple of years ago, an officer, Rosen, will recall, I think, a session here when we loudly endorsed additional resources to be invested in enforcement. So that's good to hear. That's good to hear the closure of that loop, if you like. So that's good. Okay, questions? Councillor Holliday, Councillor Cushing.
So the 3.8%, 3.8 FTE for enforcement, is that new or the old numbers? That's on your organisational tree.
Through you, Chairman, the answer is that those are additional officers provided through the zero-based budget as part of the team plan, the action plan for that area of the service.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll come to a point, but I have to say, just before Christmas, an architect who actually lives in my ward contacted me venting about the planning service, saying that he had 3 applications, I think, in different wards. There's simple little extensions, but he was struggling to get any feedback on how they were going. And in fact, even to the point actually where I think he complained to some of the senior officers. And one point he actually made, and he lives in Fakenham, is that he compared North Norfolk with Breckland and Kingston and West Norfolk. And he said, all the time, Kingston and West Norfolk hit the 8-week target for completing a planning application. He says by default, North Norfolk District Council always give themselves an extension of time. So that's why I'm just looking at the statistics you've got on page 47 there, saying North Norfolk performs less well considering Grayson's reliance on extensions of time. I do think when we look at these reports and comparing ourselves, it would be helpful to compare ourselves like apples with apples, not apples with pears. And I think it'd be interesting to see what the statistics look like without the extensions of time. And I would encourage Officer Fulcher, really, can we focus on that 8 weeks deadline? If that's the time that we are publicising that we are going to deliver our planning applications decisions by, and I think that's the one that they should be measured by, not one where we grant ourselves some extra time in order to do that. And I do hope indeed what you do, because I think ultimately that is the thing. The other question I'd have is, if you've got other authorities which are performing well, are we approaching those to find out what they're doing, which may well help this authority improve its own performance?
Well, there's certainly some misconceptions out there. First of all, we're actually outperforming the other local authorities locally, and I can bring those figures at any time, but they're actually worse than Norfolk District Council. So we're certainly determining applications quicker and of more volume. In terms of extensions of time, they're not self-appointed by us. They have to be agreed with applicants and agents to be in place. So if a case officer needs extended time, and it's invariably because we're waiting on a statutory consultee, it's very rare that it's a result of an officer issue internally. It's generally because the county council highways, for example, haven't responded as yet. But we have to get that agreed with the applicant or the agent. It's not something we can just put in place. And is it a legitimate function? The government have put these in place deliberately because they recognise that all the planning processes are stretched. So in order to avoid applications being determined within 8 weeks negatively, because that's the position that nearly all local planning authorities were facing, which is that they were being forced to make decisions just to tick a box within 8 or 13 weeks. The extensions of time were introduced to allow, with agreement, and this is the key point, with agreement, an extended period of time, and that to be the statutory time. Now, this council does use them, probably uses them more than I would like, more than officers would like, but it's no more than any other council are using. You know, we're not out of kilter with other councils. So I think it's just wrong to suggest that we are determining applications slower. We're not, we're actually quicker. It's wrong to suggest that we're putting in extensions of time ourselves without any reference. We're unable to do that, but we don't do that. But I would like to reduce our reliance on it because it's not healthy. But it's not just factions within Norfolk District Council that result in those extensions of time. It is normally due to an external pressure.
Okay, thanks for that. I think the point that you were making was clearly you were relaying a perception.
Yeah, I want to say it's fact, a perception. Actually, interesting enough, obviously we're out and about knocking on doors, and I met another architect in one of the local villages, and he actually said the same thing. So there is a perception out there, but that's why it'd be an interest for us to actually have perhaps some useful benchmarking information, actually, which would help us indeed if we get those comments coming back to us, that we can then perhaps go back and challenge them.
So maybe the solution to that is more one of a communications one, that people probably do need to have a better understanding of the performance, and you've hit the points I think that are important. But I think this is maybe a difference between perception and actual fact. And we need to be better at getting those actual facts of performance out there to allay some of those perceptions. Not all of them may be misperceptions. They may be right in some regards, but I think the overall general impression is one that we need to manage carefully, and we need to contribute, I think, by better communications in that regard.
Totally agree, and I accept that. And we'll look, as part of the communications work that we mentioned, we will certainly strengthen in that area. But we are, at the moment, I think the latest figures are around about 90% of all applications are determined on time. That's a very impressive figure.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Rest and then Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, it's just, Maxine, you mentioned on your action plan, the first bullet point on there is the members' engagement. In reflection of that, can I just make a request that in our area of Fakenham, we had a planning notice published On the 19th of December, the yellow notice was placed, dated until the 17th of January, when it could stay there. It was still there on the 12th of February, which, okay. So I thought, well, the best thing to do is find out what's going on, because a couple of local members have been asking me. It was quite a contentious one, and certainly with the town council as well. I contacted the planning department and asked them for an update, and I was informed that the application was withdrawn on the 19th of January. Now, had I known that, and a simple email, I have to say, from the department to tell me it's been withdrawn, would have allowed me to contact the district, the parish town council, explain to them it's been withdrawn, and other neighbours as well, because it was quite a contentious one, this one. So that sort of notice has been there on the telegraph pole for the last month, which really and truly I don't think should have been there, and we should have been able to tell people. It's just a request, if possible, when it's withdrawn, you could just press the button to a local member, as we had objections to it, so we should have been in that system. If you could do that, I think that would answer Maxine's question about members' engagement. Thank you.
So two really good points there. First one around site notices. In general, we do need to get better. And again, this is a general issue about taking them down once the time has passed that they're on. It's just a matter of resources. Obviously, our focus at the moment is getting them up, getting them out, and getting the application determined. But equally, we
Sorry,
should...
just interrupting it. If you ask the local member, we'll go and take them down for you.
Absolutely.
It's not a problem. We don't want them there.
Yeah, we need to look at a range of
Yeah,
mechanisms.
we were happy to take them down, I promise you.
We do. So I take that on board, and that's something we'll definitely work on. In terms of the notification, yeah, I totally agree. And my understanding is that the system actually does do that. If it's failed on this occasion, we need to look at that one, but we will certainly look at it generally. And we want automation where possible. So if an application is approved, refused, withdrawn, you should be notified by that. That's exactly the type of performance we want. We don't want you having to come and ask us, look for the answer. We need to be providing it where it's all possible. And we'll do better in that regard.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you want to contribute to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on this specific point, I'll come back to general remarks, perhaps later after members have put all the questions. There's also an issue with notices going up which do not match date-wise in terms of the determination for responses with what is on the public portal. I think the processing unit set up a case and it defaults to 21 days from whenever the case is created. And you get parish councils looking at that and calling emergency meetings to give a response to within the date set on the public portal. And then they discover that the actual yellow notice goes up sometime later, and that's probably unavoidable. But there is a disconnect in dates between the two aspects of the same process, which does cause quite a lot of consternation and avoidable criticism. In the plan, we'll see that members are going to be notified about decisions so that we don't have to rely on the tracking service on the public portal, which doesn't work that efficiently in my experience. So if we're going to get emails as members when decision notices are issued, and we know that things have happened or when withdrawals are made, then obviously that's going to be beneficial moving forward, Mr. Chairman.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. Councillor Toy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, thank you for bringing this to us. It's open and honest, I felt. You're picking up the waltz and that, and happy to take that forward, and I appreciate that. I don't have any particular comments, but there was a comment made about comparing. It's about the statutory consultee response times, the things that aren't in our control. It would be interesting to see if those responses, if the consultee, for example, I don't know, water authority or whatever that others will be using, are they having the same issue, so that we can identify and address whether we can get them to engage better with us. So that would just be interesting information to have as it goes forward, to see if we can then assist as a council in delivering responses better for you as well. Thank you.
Yeah. So statutory consultees are certainly struggling resource wise. They're struggling to meet the deadlines, hence why we have a knock-on effect and ask for extensions of time. One of the ways we're looking to address this through this plan is re-establishing the development team approach to applications at the pre-app stage, and as well as once significant applications are received, i.e. getting all the players round the table right at the beginning of the process. So having people like Anglian Water, Norfolk County Council, the EA, all of the key players around that table, having the discussions early on when we get the first whiff of a proposal coming our way. So we can talk through with planning officers, identify where the issues are, identify where the resources will be lacking, getting some known timescales in advance, and where possible, committing to a planning performance agreement, which is an agreement between us and an applicant about exactly when we will do things. And that's where we'd like to be. By setting up the development team, which is very much part of this process, we will get a lot closer to that. We can't solve the external issues, but where possible, we can try and accommodate them better. But with those comms, and comms is key to this, and this committee spelt that out at the beginning, and they're absolutely right. If we can get the communications right, so people have got that knowledge and understanding, we'll be halfway there. And that's where I think we've not been great. And I think that's why we're seeing the problems. And with the examples of the architects that have been mentioned, I think that's probably a result of just poor communication. And yeah, we are doing everything we can to address that. And this action plan is very geared towards doing that.
Okay, is there something that we might do there? In fact, if it is as frequent as you suggest, is it not possible to kind of collect that information? I'm not after precision here. I'm just sort of suggesting that, as Councillor Toy has rightly, I think, suggested here, that we might actually have a better understanding at this committee level of where those delays are arising. And in some cases where there are external agencies, we have the ability to call on those external agencies and say, hey, you're cocking up our planning system here. You're not doing this and you're not doing that on time. It's not beyond the reach of this committee to do that. But I think in the first instance, we need to have that understanding about where is the problem. And can we contribute to the solution of that problem? Can we put pressure? Can we coerce or whatever to try and make sure that we close the gap on that? So I think it would be useful if we had that information as soon as you are able to kind of say, you know, a lot of our extensions, or, you know, whatever percentage of our extensions actually arise out of Anglian Water or highways or whichever one it is, or that one I think would be a step forward. Would you agree, Councillor Dwight?
Yeah, I think hopefully we're looking to work proactively with you to deliver the solutions that you want to deliver. And I'm saying we've got a role that we can play in that, and happy.
So perhaps that might be an action that we can kind of add to the current plan.
It's absolutely fantastic. It's music to my ears. So what we'll do, I think, is this committee receives the regular sort of updates periodically. I think the next available one, it'll be useful if we bring with that a breakdown of performance generally, and I think benchmarking that against other authorities. So there's a clearer understanding about how many applications are dealt with on time, how many extensions of time we have, and then do some comparison work. I think that would answer one of the questions. The next part then would be in terms of delays, why we've got extensions of time. So we'll do a bit of research into that, and we'll keep some records of every time we've had a delay or a reason, and we can put that together as well within that report, so we can do a breakdown of why applications are delayed, and if it is down to statutory consultees, how often and who are they, and then of course we could formulate a course of action with members, which would be really grateful for.
Yeah, okay.
And I guess neutrality is going to be in there somewhere.
Without a doubt. I think that's clouded lots of things at the moment, and it continues to do so. But regardless of that, there are other legitimate reasons. So we can start that work now, and Philip and Max are here and hearing this, and we've made a note, and we'll start keeping that sort of information from now, so we've got it to present to you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Brown, you wanted, I think, to sum up.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'd just like to thank the team for putting this this work together, the plan and now the strategy and now the action plan, and Maxine in particular, who I know has been working really hard in the background to bring us to this point. We set out at the outset of this administration in 19 to put customer service at front and centre of everything that we do. And we've done that in a number of respects in other areas of the service we've delivered over the last 4 years. This is very much a key part of that objective. We are aware that our residents want us to improve our planning service. But I just want to bring us back to reality. The funding of the Environment Agency, one of our consultees, just to pick an example, has been cut by 70% in the last 10 years. Funding of the planning service, and I might sound as if I'm in competition with Councillor Cushing for the accolade of the best broken record when I say this, has been cut back by 40% since 2010. I don't see anything in the Levelling Up Bill which will assist consultees to better resource themselves to respond to us more quickly. It would be interesting.
Brown, can I just stop you? I'm mindful of the clock, and I'm also mindful that we're kind of going into a much bigger area here, which I'm not sure will add very much to this action plan. I think we understand the resources issues, but I'm not sure that
well, I'm sure it will, Mr. Chairman. So what we have here is a situation where we're chasing consultees. The public do not realise that we are dependent on outside consultees as part of the planning process. And it's much better to agree an extension of time and get decisions right and have a record that many nearby local authorities can be proud of, as we are, of our success on defending appeals. I don't know if there's a correlation between speed of decision making and outcome at appeals. That would be interesting to look into, but it's only one side of the story to say, you know, Kings Lynn deal with applications much quicker. That's only one part of a much bigger, more complicated picture, and we need to be mindful of that. So I think most stones have been unturned in this action plan. It's very detailed. It's brave because it's transparent, and we're putting out there warts and all into the public domain by looking into the aspects of the service that we have looked into in drawing this action plan together. So what I want to comment on is it's partly disappointing to see as portfolio holder that some aspects that we've been calling for some time, such as better training with the introduction of the uniform system 2 years ago. I was led to believe that the training was adequate. It's now acknowledged in here that it wasn't, which is disappointing. We also can see here that there are aspects such as induction programs, such as better and quicker, more standardized, informative, early rollout of validation of applications, which I think I would have expected to have been happening as a matter of course, really, as a standard part of our service for some time. But having said all of that, I think that this is a plan worth pursuing, implementing. I've just got a concern that it will take up resources, and we know that there are government measures to enable us to set our own planning fees as an authority, as the Building Control Service currently do, so that will be consistent with what happens in building control, rather than having fees imposed on us nationally. But I fear it won't come through in the Levelling Up Bill quick enough to be in lockstep with the implementation of this action plan. So the concern I've got is this action plan involves so many officers across the service, which is right and proper and is good to see, but it's going to be resource intensive in that sense. And I just want the comfort that the officers are comfortable with having the resources to see this through properly, because we don't want this to be partially successful. We want it to be totally successful, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that most of us would agree with the substance of what your concluding comment was. I think that we do need to know a bit more information with regard to the points that you were making about external agencies. That information has yet to come to us. When we have that information, we may be better informed to be able to understand what it is that we can do and what barriers they might be encountering in terms of delivering that. So I don't think it's our role to preempt that. You may have an opinion about that and you may be right, but that's not our role today. Our role today is to endorse this action plan and deliver this action plan. And we'll deal with the implications of that as they roll out. And we won't understand that until we get partway down that road and have a better picture. So I hope that kind of, what you've said, I think is understood. You don't populate an action plan like this without, or with the kind of mentions that are in this action plan without there being considerable resource implications. That's I think widely understood. So, okay. What we've got then is I recommend the Overview and Scrutiny Committee supports the Planning Service Improvement Plan, and I think we've got a rider to that, which is basically to ask for further information in respect to those agencies that are responsible for extensions of time. So we're not asking for a big report here, we're just asking for something which I think is fairly focused, and you'll come back to us. What sort of timescale do you think that might be helpful to do?
Yeah, so we think probably around June time, if that's okay.
Does that sort of sound reasonable? I think bearing in mind our calendar for the next few months, I think that might be a reasonable time to come back to a new administration with that information. So, okay. So can I have I think is it a show of hands on this? Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Toy to propose, Councillor Heinrich to second. Show of hands, please, for that. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right. I'm mindful that we've been going on for 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think it's probably appropriate to take a 10-minute break, and we'll reconvene at 12 o'clock. Okay, and we'll deal with the car park and the officer delegated decisions. I haven't got very much left, but let's just break at that point, please. Thank you. if we can get back to the agenda, please. So we have on our agenda next is the item 13, which is the car park income data monitoring from October 21 through to September 22. Councillor Adams, I don't know whether you want to do a quick introduction in lieu of Councillor Seawood.
Yeah, very briefly. So, sorry, I appreciate there was an error with the data that was initially provided. That now includes the income from the app. So obviously you've got the parking app that people can use, and you can see that car parking income, whilst it probably won't see the levels we saw in the last year with, you know, huge numbers of people, unprecedented numbers coming to the district, and that had other impacts, of course, as well. I think the best part of 20% increases in litter bin volumes, waste volumes, etc. Litter bins, which was, you know, tremendous amount of additional resource impact there. But you can see how much car parking income contributes towards the district and the services that are provided. I mean, you look at Cromer, of course, that's a significant amount of the income. We know, of course, the costs of assets like Cromer Pier, which of course will become a bit more normal after the third and final phase of the current project. I believe we were spending an average of about £300,000 a year previously. You can see how the income is so useful in funding assets such as public toilets and amenity provisions. So there's little more to say here. I think there is more work to do in terms of the car parking. I think after May and into the future, we'll have to consider additional resourcing to look at the future of the management of our car parks. You know, it's been considered around the potential need of an officer to look at the income from car parks, but also there's a feeling we need to have some more blue sky thinking in terms of how we are enforcing, particularly some of the largest car parks. Some of them are a lot larger than some of the smaller ones. There's a big difference between them. Some of the car parks on this list, and some of the larger ones are very hard to manage. So there's work needed there, I think, in the future to make our job easier in enforcing, but also in providing the best possible service to those people that are using those car parks, the best possible customer experience, I think, because you know, obviously where we see the peak numbers of visitors, that has an impact on the customer experience in terms of queues at parking machines, etc. So I think there has been investment in all the car parks where it's needed. There's been some issues with car parking machines surfacing, etc. And that obviously needs to continue. But overall, you can see it's you know, a significant source of income to the authority that helps keep costs down in terms of rates and the cost of amenities. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Officer level, do you wish to comment on that, introduce anything or add anything to what we've got before us, or are you happy to move to questions?
Yeah, apologies around the issue with the data. I think that comes from the fact that the responsibility for the car parks has moved. It was in June, it was in May, it was in the leisure and locality services. It then moved across into effectively into property services. That came with some people departing the authority, taking knowledge with them. And so in terms of some of the production of this report, it's been a bit of a learning curve in terms of data. You'll see from some of the charts, they don't include the, as Councillor Adams has said, don't include the information associated with effectively the phone app and other payment methods that's not through the pay and display machine. Oh, they do. Okay, sorry, that's what we've updated. Well, but so effectively, it has been a bit of a learning curve for us. The original report didn't, and therefore the figures looked significantly out of kilter for this year. I think what is important is that members see that this year the performance has been strong in terms of income from car parks, and that we'll use that data in order to understand where we focus attention around particular car parks or particular issues that may be presented through that. But I'm happy, or we're happy, to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions then, Councillor Holliday.
What are the costs of the car parks? I don't see how you can decide how to invest in additional resources without knowing what the expenses are associated with the income. So I'd like to see a net rather than a gross. That's one question. Another question is Weybourne seems to have fallen off a cliff, not literally, but given the pressure on the loos there, which were consistently blocked all summer through overuse, it seems very odd that the data is showing such low usage, and I wondered if there was an issue there that could be double checked. And then another quick point is to say that there's no impact on carbon footprint of a car park or car parks. I think is a little disingenuous, because there is, until we all get electric cars, there's quite a lot of impact on carbon footprint. Thank you very much.
So picking up those in order, the first issue around costs, absolutely, it is something we are now working on as part of cost per car park. Unfortunately, again, it was a timing issue. That is quite a complex piece of analysis to break down expenditure in that manner, and so the intention is we will feed that into future reports to this committee, but effectively there just wasn't an opportunity to do an accurate enough breakdown to be able to realistically reflect the true cost across each car park, because it was just the way it's been potentially being accounted for. They are allocated the car park, but some of the costs we need to understand that are centralised. In terms of Weybourne, it's one that as officers we picked up, and we have done some, or we're doing some further investigation into it, whether it is an issue around actual reduction in income from it, whether it is something to do with the posting of where the income's being put. But at the moment, I can't offer you an explanation to that. The third question, sorry, Councillor Holliday, was.
It's just saying that there's zero impact on carbon impact from car parks.
Yeah, and I think in terms of that, it's accepted to a degree, but those people will still travel. If there are no car parks, people will still travel. They will still park in other places. In fact, you could argue that they'll drive around more looking for parking spaces. I think there is the purpose of putting is there no impact is that this report has no impact on carbon, rather than the car parks in general. I think we fully recognise that there is an impact of people travelling to this district in or within the district in cars. However, we are a tourist destination that's not served well by public transport necessarily, and equally within the public transport for our residents, a lot of people rely on cars to visit our market towns in order to go and do their weekly shopping or other activity. So I think it is inevitable that we will, that people will continue to travel by cars. I think the impact of not having car parks means that those people would then be displaced out into residential streets and other areas, which would probably have a more significant impact. So I think it's about what the impact of the contents of the report, rather than car parks in general. That's the purpose of that note.
You content with those? Okay, Councillor Cushing and Councillor Blackwood.
It's a very quick question. On the graph, so I just question about the Limes car park in Fakenham. On the graph, there's no income at all come October. Have you closed it without telling us?
No.
The income that we have in this report is only taking us up to the end of October. On all the car parks, you'll see that there's none after. Oh, in fact,
So I think the other thing to note is that the Limes car park is subject to an agreement with a local business who purchase permits from this authority. And so although the income may have gone down because a lot of the spaces are taken up by permit holders, but that income is generated through different means effectively. I don't know whether it has actually gone down to zero or it's gone down to a particularly low level. However, I suspect that the actual drop off that you're reporting is probably linked to a reporting error, as you suggested. That is what's taken from what's posted against the ledger figures. And so it may be, and I think we identify in the report, in Wells, for instance, there's one where the income is very high in one car park and very low in another car park, and then goes back to a sort of more, I think there's been a misposting in the ledger against where the car, so it could just be a reporting error. We'll have a look at it, but as their figures are taken from the ledger, then obviously that's what's being posted on the ledger. We'll do some further investigations into some of those anomalies.
Okay, thanks very much. That answered the question that I was going to ask in respect to Wells. Fine, thank you. Councillor Blathwaite.
Hi, Steve. Yeah, just 3 questions really. The first is very easy. What on earth happened in Stalham this summer? But I didn't notice, and I drive through it regularly. It just seems like it must have been, I don't know, carnival.
And again, we'll do some investigation into that, but but Stalham was sustained over more than one, it wasn't just one set of figures, so it was sustained over a couple of months. But we are looking into those in the background. Again, it's what was posted on, it's what's been taken off the ledger posting. So we just have to look at how that income was generated and arrived.
Yeah, and can you forgive my ignorance, but since I've had a ticket, I haven't been visiting the actual machines. Is there a plan, or are they already rolled out to have swipe card machines? Because I understand it makes quite a big difference to income from people buy longer periods from a swipe card machine than they do cash.
By swipe card, you mean where you present
Debit
your
card.
ticket, your contactless? We already have a number of machines that are already contactless across the district. They tend to, I think they're in the bigger car parks. As we upgrade our ticket machines, or as we come to replacement of ticket machines, we will look at those wherever possible. There are some machines, however, in car parks that have poor mobile signal, and therefore those options are not available. So where we are only able, where machines reliably are only able to take cash, that will be the means of payment. We are in all our car parks have the ability to take phone payments via various apps. And so if people want to pay for parking on a through an app, then they're able to do so. Obviously, the slight thing is if you've got no signal, you potentially have to be away from the car park to pay for that. But there will always be some of our car parks where we are reliant on cash payments based on the availability of mobile phone signal, etc., to take other technologies. But predominantly, we will be looking at having that multi-channel payment taking wherever possible.
And thirdly, are you happy with enforcement being effective in all our car parks?
So clearly the enforcement is undertaken by a third party. It's provided by King's Lynn currently. We, as with any contract, we will always look at how effective that is. We will ask questions about particular times and and dates of enforcement activity. I think there is some sense that the provision is not necessarily adequate across the whole of our district, particularly at busy times potentially, and we're challenging that back into to others to say, can you explain what, anecdotally we're being told there wasn't a lot of enforcement, can you tell us what you have actually been doing during that time? And we'll continue to do that. So we will look at that contract, I think, comes to an end in a couple of years time. So we'll be, as part of that contract renewal process, be looking at what we specify in terms of quality and quantity of enforcement, etc.
Just as a follow on from that, are you looking at ANPR type technology for the future in respect, because that makes a big difference to enforcement?
So effectively, the answer is we would like to use any technology that makes the parking experience easier. There is a restriction on local authorities' ability to use ANPR technology. And so we would have to look at doing that either through a third party or a local authority trading arm, LATCO type arrangement. There are, it's something that we will continue to look at, but when we investigated it previously, there were some difficulties in being able to use ANPR technology as a local authority.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? Okay. I've got Councillor Withington and then Councillor Toy.
Thank you. Page 64, item 2.10. I'm really pleased to see the acknowledgement of the impact of free car parking spaces for short-term shopping trips, etc. I think when we first experienced that in Sheringham was in the sinkhole when you gave us some free spaces to help support the community there. And it certainly did have an impact and actually increased the revenue on Morris Street car park where you gave us places. So my question really is about, I'm really pleased to see that you're acknowledging it would be detrimental to our high streets to remove those spaces. So that is obviously not part of the thought process going on. But I do wonder whether there's been any investigation into potentially increasing those, because there seems to be a suggestion in the figures that it increases income from car parks by people staying for longer anyway. So I'm just curious about that, where the thought process is on that.
It hasn't, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been significant consideration given to it. I think there is a balance because obviously, as you've heard from Councillor Adams, the car parks provision income basically means that we can afford to do lots of, or it pays for lots of other activity that the district council undertakes, particularly in the discretionary areas of provision. We absolutely recognise that we want to make sure that people are attracted to our, to our market towns and to locations where they are encouraged to go and do almost a pop and shop type arrangement. So people aren't going out of town or to further away to do that shopping. They're encouraged to go in and do multiple activities, multiple shopping in a range of local shops in the towns. But obviously that provision then has to be balanced against the loss of income that would be generated, and the figures in there do demonstrate that there is a cost to the local authority of supporting those high streets, and it's absolutely right that we should do that. I think the general feeling, and we can do some more work on this, is that that level of provision in most car parks for the size of car park is adequate, and that those there is a good turnaround of those spaces so that people do come and use them from the period of time. We obviously have increased the number of spaces in North Walsham associated with the HAS project and the desire to get people into what is effectively now an enhanced market town centre. And clearly, if those opportunities present themselves in other areas, then we'll look at doing so. However, it will have a negative impact on income earned through spaces, because they are spaces that then aren't earning income from other activity. And in the summer, you will see from the figures that, you know, that turnover of space in terms of the number of tickets that are utilised in the summer months does increase at the 20 minutes, which tends to suggest that people are continuing to pop in. But that actually those car parks are also full when those ticket, you know, when those 20-minute spaces are being utilised. So there is that balance that if you introduce more, it might introduce more people to pop in, but you will have people who are potentially staying longer in the town. So yeah, it's not being considered at this stage, but I'm sure if there are opportunities to look at it in the future in specific locations, then we will do so.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Troy. Oh, yes. I've got you on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, ANPR, yeah, I did do some reading on that, and local authorities can't use it. We're not allowed access to the databases. So it is a challenge. Many of us would like to see that happen because it's a lot easier. But unfortunately, local authorities get different rights to companies. So that's the reality there. But I'm sure officers will work on that going forward to see if there's a solution to that. And the other one I just wanted to make comment on, and it ties up with something Councillor Adams says about going forward, blue sky thinking, Councillor Holiday about the green agenda. I think that going forward for car parking, we need to keep car parking locally for residents and people that come into town. But I think we need to look at an integrated transport strategy that allows out of town parking where people can use the trains or buses. There needs to be work done there to stop our towns getting congested, because it's not just about the parking, it's about the pollution, and pollution kills people. So when you get all those traffic queuing through Cromer, that is raising pollution levels. I don't think it's ever been measured, but I think there's an opportunity in the future to deliver something different in North Norfolk. So I just wanted to put that in there because so many people have raised bits of it that there may be a new strategy we can think of after May, whoever's here can to consider.
Yeah, I think your point, I'm not sure whether I would probably use the word challenge of the future. There's an opportunity, but actually meeting that challenge, because it's a really complex topic, and addressing that so that you end up with a net benefit is I from my perspective is not one of those kind of one size fits all solutions either. The solution on a coastal location, remote, will be very different to that in Fakenham.
Agreed.
And so I think that we have these boxes to be ticked in these reports, but I think in some ways they are nominal.
Well, no, I think there are opportunities there that should be explored.
Well,
Yeah,
absolutely. But in the context of as was raised, you know, impact on carbon footprint. I think that it is a very complex topic, and
agreed.
You know, what you pointed out is absolutely right, but I think it's a huge challenge that anybody that can sort that out will be a wealthy person in the very short order of time, I think. But anyway, Councillor Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Just an observation from that. I mean, in North Walsham, since we've had the travel hub, we've now seen an improved bus service. And that is, you know, a lot of people are increasingly using that as they come to Coast or to go into Norwich. We've also seemed to be getting increased use on the station, because people are now able to park in Hornbeam Road free of charge currently. We may need to look at, of course, rather than paying the extra £3 to NCP to be in the station itself. So it makes our train fare much more reasonable.
Yeah.
So there's a whole raft of things we've got to keep in mind. You know, it's not just simply saying we need less car parks or more car parks. We ought to make more money out of car parks. We've got to look at how people are travelling, how they're using those car parks. And there's a vast study there, which clearly we may need to attack whoever their post may.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other points you want to raise? I think the only thing that certainly comes out of this, well, the kind of things that come out of this, I think that may warrant further work is what can we do as a local authority to kind of improve the customer experience, i.e. provide the kind of car parking that's needed in the right places. And I think in order to do that, I think we need to have a better understanding about the performance of car parks in terms of the surpluses that they generate and the contribution they make to the local economy. Because there's two strands to that. There's what we would receive as income, although I think our perspective on this is a bit limited because we, in local government terms, we tend to look at income and expenditure. Whereas I think we need to have as has been raised already, a net figure here. So we need to know what we're spending on these car parks, or what are we costing. So we've got some wonderful income streams there, but we're not mindful. We don't know what the costs are. And when it comes to making sort of business-like decisions for the future, I think we need that information in order to say that, well, actually, is a piece of land becoming available in this part of the town or village or whatever have you, would that be a good opportunity for us as a local authority to buy that and turn it into a car park? I don't know. All of that kind of thing needs to be considered. It needs to be considered in the context of the overall our approach to addressing the carbon footprint. Very complex matter, but I think the next steps from this is towards understanding that net figure and the potential that there might be to provide a better customer service and perhaps better income, better surplus. I'm not going to use the word profit because that's not appropriate, but surplus, I think we do need to be thinking in those kind of terms.
Absolutely, and I think that's something that we're already beginning to look at as officers. I mean, the only caveat or caution I would provide you is, of course, there is a lot of programmed work to do with car parks. And so if you look at something in one particular year, the car park may have been resurfaced. And so you'll have a huge amount of cost against, but it might not be then resurfaced or have significant works for another 15 or 20 years. So we need to make sure that we're giving you a rounded picture of programmed activity associated with those works.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Are we all done then? Yep, that's fine. I understood. Thank you for your contribution today.
One thing, Chairman, just to say that we do carry out air quality monitoring in the town centres. So I know that this point that was raised earlier on, but I know we're carrying out some in the town centre of Cromer at the moment. Interestingly, the only area where we've been ever above the threshold in terms of what's considered an appropriate limit is actually in Hobbiton.
Yes, that's right.
And that was, I believe, by the bridge, isn't it? I think
yes.
So with the coastal towns, it's often felt that the sea air has that sort of neutralizing impact. But without a doubt, we're dealing with huge numbers of cars. And I think the best stats we've got, which I can't see are accurate now because it's 2003 odd, is that about 11% of people are coming on public transport to North Norfolk for their visits. I think that number has grown. That's sort of supported by the number of train station visit numbers, etc., which have been very healthy. But I do think there's work to do there as well. I certainly recognise that as part of the overall picture. But I think there's other work to do in terms of the customer experience and improving the level of income from these facilities. So thank you.
Okay, right. So we are asked to note the report. Can I have a show of hands to note the report, please? Thank you. Okay. And perhaps I did see you taking notes. So if we could have a follow-up in terms of those points that we've raised in terms of net figures, that would be really helpful. Thank you. Right. Okay. Moving to item 14, which is the officer delegated decision, September 22 to January 23. Any observations in respect to those delegated decisions? No. Councillor Holiday.
It's presumably a very simple answer to this, but the date of decision and the date reported to cabinet seem quite far apart temporarly. I just wondered why that was.
That's partly because I don't receive them as soon as they're made, so I chase them, and sometimes it's just that, so I have some to report through, so rather than reporting them each month, but I've had a sort of gap where I didn't have any, so that's why, but I have made a concerted effort to prompt officers to send those through to me, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Right. Are you even note the report? Okay, are you happy to note that report? Can I have a show of hands then, please, to do that? Thank you. That's unanimous. Moving on to items 15 and 16. So that's cabinet work programme and the overview and scrutiny work programme.
Yeah, just on the cabinet work programme, I'll try and get through this as quickly as possible because I know we are moving on in time. Just to note that obviously there are a significant number of property transactions going to cabinet in March. I think trying to kind of finalise things prior to the election. The one thing that I would note, and I noted this at the last meeting as well, is the solar carport. I think that will be of interest to the committee, given the interest in the reef project in general. So just to raise that. That's everything I would raise from the cabinet work programme, unless there's any particular questions.
Any questions on the cabinet work programme? No. Moving on.
On the overview and scrutiny work programme, just to note that the PCC has confirmed they are happy to attend next month's meeting to provide an update on their crime and safer neighbourhoods plan. We have also requested data on ambulance response times for the specific postcodes that are a concern, and we are awaiting that information. That's everything from the scrutiny work programme. Just to note that we did have some written replies on the reef building work sign off. We are awaiting that written response on the use of the vacant enabling land on the reef site. Obviously, Chief Executive is on leave this week, but expect to have that soon after his return.
Okay, any questions on that? No? Right, okay then. So you're happy to note both of those? Can I get a show of hands to note both of those, please? Thank you. That's right. I think that then concludes our agenda for today. So thank you very much indeed for all your input and attendance today. Formally close the meeting.